I am here with Scott Walter because it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday, therefore it's Scott Walter. Hey Scott, how you doing?
Good, Randy. It's nice to have you back on my Wednesday podcast.
Well, I'm so glad that you're glad to have me here. Um,
Yeah.
we, we have had, of course, another huge week. And I think we need to make it clear that when we're talking about robots on Wednesday, we're not just talking about two-legged robots, but four-wheeled robots as well.
Mhm.
So I want to dig in today, if I can with you, Scott. I want to dig into the whole AI, AGI, FSD, because I think that's a matter that people are confused about. I think that there's some definitional issues that you and I won't solve because the world hasn't solved them yet. But I think that there's the real deal with regard to Tesla is about where they are in the AI and AGI space compared to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. So,
so I'd like to really start in that area. So Elon said again yesterday, or it might have even been this morning, but because I get confused, Elon said that FSD end to end is like baby AGI.
mhm.
Now, let me tell you what I think that means. Then you tell me where I got it right or wrong, because I'm not the scientist here, okay? I take it to mean like in terms of its understanding of the world around it, it's a baby because it only understands as much as it needs to at that developmental level. Like a human, it ignores what it doesn't need. So, for instance, in FSD, it doesn't care what the ground cover is in the adjacent street scene. It doesn't care what the nationality is of the pedestrians that it's passing. It's only interested in the things it needs to be interested in. And then, like a baby, it responds quickly to those things it's been trained to do. So, a 4-year-old can throw a ball with some accuracy, it can catch a ball at a slow speed. But, if you throw that ball at 40, 50 miles an hour, it's going to just go like this. So that's how I'm looking at baby AGI. Is that somewhat sensible?
Yeah, I think it's partly sensible. And I think that the first thing, just to kind of summarize the week that was with humanoid bots, we were in the middle of the week almost. And it's been kind of a slow news week regarding the humanoid bots, just because we're coming down off of the NVIDIA sugar high from last week. I mean, there was
Right.
just a torrent of all kinds of stuff. So things are a little bit quieter right now. It doesn't mean that something crazy won't happen tomorrow or the day after. And so most of the news has been, like we say, about the four-wheeled ones, FSD, and all sorts of discussions about, are we close to AGI? Do we have AGI? The most of the discussions I see about AGI right now are always sort of followed up with a moving the goalpost meme. That if you take the definition of what AGI was a decade ago, and if you were to go back in time and show them Chat GPT, they would have said, "Oh my God, that's AGI. It's right there." But every time that there were gains made, suddenly, oh wait a minute, it's going to be this, and everything else. I think most people agree that once you get embodied AI and the embodiment of it, you get closer and closer because you get the possibility for curiosity, for exploration, to be able to interact with the environment, to be able to take actions. So, which is a lot different than just being able to compose sonnets. It's really next level. Plus, you have the multimodality that's going on there as far as the sensory input. So you're right that for driving, there's a certain amount of AGI, baby AGI in there. So you want it to drive you to the supermarket, but it doesn't need to know how to go in there and buy stuff. Okay. It doesn't have to understand what the interior of a supermarket is like. It just knows that that's a destination you want to go to. There's a parking lot in front of it. How do you navigate it? Understand enough the physics of the world of how you want to interact or not interact with things. And, obviously the rules of the road. And we seem to have taken a big step. I'm trying to think, did it start Monday morning with Elon sort of saying, and at first a lot of people weren't sure, was this something that someone made up, because it was like an internal email, and I was like with a scant eyes, like really meaning that this big push that the deliveries are going to be slowed down
Right.
because they want to make sure everyone, when they get the delivery, gets FSD and will be demonstrated it, which is kind of a good thing, because a lot of people, when they buy their Teslas, it can be completely touchless, which means you may not know anything about driving your Tesla. So you really want to go in there and know a little bit about going in. So getting FSD, I think, is good. And at first, I sort of looked at it the same way most people did, is like, oh, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get more people to buy it, because They want to increase revenue, get the margins up and everything else. But it's free for 30 days.
Right.
So it's not going to have an impact on this quarter. It's going to be, 30 days after that. So they're in the second quarter. So what's going on? And part of it is Elon has also put a couple of breadcrumbs out there. One of them last week, he said that they are no longer compute constrained.
Right.
I was like, wow, that's kind of big. And then the next thing, kind of rolling this thing out and say, okay, what's going on? It seems like there was some sort of meeting. And then he put out this other post, a fortune cookie that says, good things are going to, or good gains are going to be made, when you go on vacation. And it's something that refers to this idea of Operation Vacation, that at one point, everything will be set up so well that the engineers can literally go on vacation. The system will acquire enough data. When they come back, it'll improve. And that's when you get that flywheel of things really going fast. So as usual, Tesla is always seeing something in the data. We don't know what it is they're seeing. They see everything in the data, which is why every move that they do is data driven.
Yeah.
And we always sit here Monday morning quarterbacking everything and trying to, understand, but they are seeing some stuff. And the one thing that people think that they're seeing is that the number of miles per disengagement is going up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that they're no longer getting the data that they need to improve the system because the system is getting better.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Okay. And so he's like, well, wait a minute. That means we need to do something, because that is really one of the key things that they're using. They're training on the disengagements.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not at all your entire drive. They're trying to look for the interesting parts of the drive. So how do you get more disengagements? Well, you've got to get more drivers out there.
Yeah.
So they want to increase this flywheel, and they could end up getting like 3 times more drivers in a short period of time. And you're going to be sampling from a completely different data group, because right now it's biased towards the early adopters. Those of us who've been driving FSD enough, we know the quirkiness of it. And that's why we're not disengaging, because we're confident enough right now.
Yeah.
And we're letting it do what are kind of some squirrely situations, because we're just like, I just want to see, it made it through it. Right. And we didn't do anything. And we maybe didn't do any feedback. Because I wish they would have like a thumbs up and thumbs down on some things, just right. So I could say that it's like, oh, that was just awesome. I mean, put that one on the training set. And the other is like, whoa, it's going to be much better. But usually this comes down to something more like a disengagement. And this will help them get that training data set they want. And it was really Meta, or Meta 4 is his Twitter handle, X handle, that just knows a lot. He understands AI training really quite well. That kind of brought that to my attention in Spaces last night. And it just like completely made sense when he made it. It was just like, oh, of course it's about the data. The fact that you're going to get more subscription, that's the benefit. That's the side effect, but that's not the reason they're doing it. The reason they're doing it is they want to collect the data and get more of that, and it's going to be useful. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth. People saying, but you get shadow mode. Yeah, shadow mode does some stuff, but it doesn't really trigger what are the key things that you want, because you can't tell. A disengagement means a driver is uncomfortable, and you want to find out when are they uncomfortable. Shadow mode doesn't tell you anything about that. Yeah. All it tells you is that they took a different path than you did, and it may be that both of them were equally good. There was nothing wrong. Mm-hmm. And the way I look at it, it's sort of like, shadow mode is just having like an understudy at the opera. And the understudy is ready to go at any time, but the understudy never goes out and performs. And so you don't know if the understudy is any good. How are they going to handle the limelight? Are they going to be able to handle the pressure? So at some point, they literally have to take center stage. You got to get them out there. Mm-hmm. And so you need more of that. And yes, there's a lot of simulation data out there, but the simulation data is fed from it. So you have all these different data sources, and each one of them is maybe of equal value or something like that. But one of them right now is getting out of balance, and that is we don't have enough new fresh data coming in. It makes sense to go ahead and do that. So you're going to start seeing this stuff cranking up pretty quickly. And this is why I've kind of jokingly said, right now we're in the March of nines. And next month we're going to be in the April of nines. It's going to get the April of nines. It's going to be going on from there. Yeah, that's my expectation.
And of course, they also opened it up to everybody that already owns a Tesla vehicle, who has FSD capability, or
yes, anyone, not just new owners, but owners who don't have it. So they want to get that, and we don't know what the take rate's going to be.
No,
but they may not care. They may say, look, if we can get 75, 80% of the fleet for 30 days to go out there, and the people really use it, because they kind of will. They'll be curious. I'm sure enough of them will be curious that they may get the volumes data, because it's kind of surprised me is that they haven't quite hit 1 billion miles yet in the fleet. They're like 880 million or something like that. And I was expecting that way back in like December, they would hit that early.
Yeah.
And it seemed like they didn't, even though they had maybe 400,000, I think, FSD drivers,
Right.
now they could potentially get close to 2 million that will be out there.
Right.
And if they're all curious and if they're all really using it, then you could see the data come in and then it could really improve. And then people are like, wow, I'm so impressed, especially, I definitely want to have this thing.
Right.
And
Right.
so you could see this really interesting flywheel going along there of accelerating everything. So, at first I was like wondering, like, why now? Why are they deciding to do that? And everyone just thinks it's for like, oh, they're trying to pump the stock or this and that. And it's like, no, they've seen like something in the data that's like, this is the moment they've been waiting for, that they can really push it out there and get a lot more. Now there's going to be all the talking heads. It'll be on CNBC,
Sure.
and it's going to be, in a sense, great marketing and all
Oh,
this
yeah.
other
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
And from it, there's going to be the side effects, and the stock already got a little bit of a bump this
Right.
morning from a result of that. But those are just the side effects of what's going on. And the engineering team, they do all that in a vacuum. They don't care about that. Those are all distractions.
Right.
The talking heads can say whatever, that's not going to affect their decision on what they do. They're looking at the data, they're seeing what they need, what the requirements are. And yeah, that makes absolute sense of what they're doing.
Well, speaking of engineering heads, they have a new engineer that joined the team. He was with
Hmm.
Waymo. Name is Charles Key. I'm assuming Q.
Hmm.
I think that's
Yep.
Key.
Yep.
Anyway, and he joined the team, and he was only there for one day, and he's already tweeted, or I'm sorry, posted on X, and he posted, "My mind is blown."
Yeah. Yeah.
The
What
guy.
did he see? Yes. Now
What
everyone
did
wants to
he
know what did
see?
he see?
Everybody was
Now,
in.
now there's an interesting theory that is like, oh, he must have seen something amazing in full self driving because it came from Waymo. And it was kind of brought us like, well, you get to be careful there because he's still under NDA with
Yes.
Waymo.
Right. Right.
And while California doesn't enforce these anti-compete clauses because they've been pretty much thrown out. I don't think any state you can do
It's
like the
hard. It's
anti-compete.
hard.
It's
Yeah.
very hard. But at the same time, there's an NDA. And the other thing was brought up is like he already was working on full self-driving over at Waymo. He wants a new challenge. That's why
Yeah.
it's like he's probably bored with it. He's probably seen it. It's like, why would you want to go over to another company and do the same thing? Especially what you're doing is like you're not the person that's building it from the ground up, but it's kind of near the end. So more than likely, he has nothing to do with the full self-driving team. He's got something else because he's got this other expertise and set of tools he's bringing with him. So everyone's like, well, then, what could that be? And it's like, well, it's probably Optimus. He's probably saw something with that he couldn't see before. And now it's like, yikes. Wow, this is pretty impressive.
All right. Well, since you brought up Optimus, you gave me
Mm,
another opportunity to make a segue here. So if we agree that the LLMs really are not close. I mean, I don't know, maybe you don't agree with me. I feel like the LLMs are not close to what we're seeing with FSD in its end-to-end capabilities because it doesn't have to take into consideration the speed or the consequences or
mm,
even the ability to get the information in quickly, discernibly, and then actually take action. But the other people argue, well, there's only three things that a car has to do. It only has to hit the accelerator, the brake, and the steering. But I would argue that when you have hit the accelerator, the brake, or the steering, those three things are very nuanced, and
mm.
they also work together. And so the three things working together create all kinds of possibilities, and it has to be done really fast, way
Yeah.
faster than
Yeah.
any.
And it's a bit more than that. It also has to do a certain amount of reasoning.
Right.
So it's one thing to just say, you got to stay in your lane. But the other thing is to understand the situational awareness and decide that I want to change lane. Why do you want to change?
Yeah.
There's a lot more that's going on in the reasoning. And so it's it's a bit more advanced than the LLMs, even though it's going to probably take a page from some of the LLMs as far as potentially, for using transformers for like memory of what's going on, or maybe, truly past events. If it wants to learn something about your neighborhood, maybe it has some way of being able to keep that in mind. But, the multimodality. So like, pure LLM, yeah, it's impressive, but all it can do is text in and text out. But the ones where you have the multimodality, that's really getting impressive, where you ask an LLM to describe a scene
Yeah.
and it comes back and does something, and then it starts creating actions from it. And that's where it's getting more exciting. So the LLMs are going to be an important facet of that whole thing. But, by themselves, they may be they're just a one-trick pony at this point.
Yeah.
We want them to be able to do a little bit more. And when you start integrating them into all these systems, it's going to be something else. And they're doing a certain amount of reasoning, and also FSD is doing it. But it has, it has, like you say, it has to be done a lot quicker. And
And
the
it has a plan.
consequences are life and death. I
And
mean,
it
it
has a
really
plan.
is.
Yeah. And it's a plan
Yeah.
so far in advance.
Yeah. Yeah.
To think,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
there's a pedestrian there and a dog here, and there's a car pulling out here, and I still
And
want to
it's doing incredible reasoning now. I mean, some of the drive I did today was like the first time it like came into the park, and it was like so close to taking a parking space. It was like looking and glancing. And it was almost like I'm supposed to do something here. I'm not sure what it is. It's like it's like kept on looking. It's like and missing these things, and then it kind of drove to the parking lot. But it was just came so close. And I know it's happened in a few cases where people that says, yeah, it's gone in there, even though it's not really designed or meant to do that yet.
Yeah.
That's going to be coming in a later release. It also anticipated scenes much better. So I had a landscaping vehicle pull out of a street and like kind of, it wasn't pulling into traffic. It was actually pulling into the grass on the side.
Okay.
Because it was like going to go and park in there. Version 11, it would have slammed on the brakes at that point. And then, you would get that red blinking thing. And like, it's like, oh, you got to watch it. And it didn't worry at all. I didn't, I was watching, I saw exactly what's going on. I saw where he was going, and it's like, he's not pulling in the road at all. He's just going on the grass, but he's pulling out of a street. And it was like, chill. It didn't worry about it. And I've noticed a lot of other situations that it knows when you're getting into situations that are a little bit dodgy, that, oh, there's some pedestrians around, a couple of slowed vehicles, some cyclists, there's a crosswalk up there. I'm just going to ease back a little bit on the accelerator and then kind of wait until I get past this thing before I start going. It's like, wow, it's really showing prudence and everything else that's going on there, as well as assessing situations like a parked vehicle, trying to decide, is this car really parked or not parked, and making really good decisions on whether it is or is not doing that. And that means there's a certain amount of reasoning that's going on, if that's the right term, because I'm afraid when I use a term like that, we anthropomorphize it and we make it sound like it's conscious. But there is something going on in that decision tree that is why it is appearing to be very human-like now, very human-like.
So then if we go to the bot has way more output devices. So it's got all kinds of actuators and other things that it needs to take into consideration, motors, etc. So there's even more nuances and more combinations involved, but the actions don't have to be as fast. The response doesn't have to be to as the range of uses, the range of things that it has to plan for and take into consideration are not nearly as great. But like, even if the bot were driving a car, it would still only need the same amount of capabilities as the car's internal robot. Isn't that right? Isn't that?
Yeah. Well, the bot's not going to drive the car. I think we know that. But if it was, but for the most part, yeah, it's not operating at the speed of the car. The car is going 70 miles an hour plus, and these bots are only going to be going about 3 to 5 miles per hour. The consequences are not quite the same. If it fails, if it drops something, or if it falls over, it's not quite the same consequence of a car crashing into something at 70 miles per hour. Right. So there's these other things. And I don't think there's really that difference. So what if it's 40 actuators, 42 actuators versus whatever the outputs are, the neural nets can handle that. And there's even more going on. I mean, think about it. There's way more outputs than just turning the wheel, accelerator pressing and stuff like that. There's a decision to turn the lights on or not, the blinkers on or not, the wipers. I mean, there's all these other kinds of decisions that are going on that are sort of outputs that it's deciding, and it could handle a lot of them. And that's the same thing with Optimus. Is it might seem like, oh, there's a lot of things that are kind of going on, but they're really, it's sort of like saying, well, sentences are made up of lots of letters. It's like, don't worry about it. It's made up more of words. Yeah. That's really what's important, or the word counts. And so different kinds of motions and actions are going to be more akin to a word, as opposed to, oh, I've got to worry about what all these actuators are doing. Don't worry about it. It's just a combination of specific letters. So right now, you're going to have photons in, right? And actions out is what's going on. And it's going to be taking those things and figuring out what to do based on some sort of task that it's supposed to do, and figuring that out and just creating a sentence of actions. That's just the way to think about it. That's how LLMs are working. Right. They're just taking words and then figuring out how to combine them to get a sentence that is semantically and grammatically correct. for what you want to do. And that's going to be the same thing with the actions, is that they're going to be figuring out what action do I take now that is going to fill the requirements of what those inputs are.
Right.
And again, it's broken down to that if you look at what we do with our hands, you could probably describe them in a fairly simple vocabulary of what are all the things. I've got a clasp, I've got an open, I've got the Vulcan
right.
salute, thumbs up. It's like you can come up with all these different kind of sequences, and then you just tell someone, do the thumbs up, and I know that's what I have to do. I don't say, oh, I'm going to take the index finger and I'm going to move it this way. It's a complete idea that these are the letters that make up that word or that gesture.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can do the same extension with the arm and everything else. So all those will kind of come together, and then you'll just start blending them together. I mean, that's what they're going to be really good at, is they're going to realize, well, what you want me to do is not exactly this or that. It's something in between, and it'll figure out something in the middle. And you'll get that really nice kind of blending that you see, or interpolation from one action to another.
So then it seems like the complexity of the planning also is far less than in the car.
Mm-hmm.
So the car has to be thinking about something that's going to happen a minute, maybe not a minute out, but certainly 15, 16, 20 seconds out. And in terms of cross traffic, in terms of what kind of pedestrians are in the area, all the kinds of things that we've been talking about. Whereas the bot probably isn't thinking 15 seconds or 16 seconds out, because the movements are
it's going to be broken down. And even the same thing with the car is the car's got kind of an overview. It's thinking about the trip. So it is thinking sometimes on the scale of minutes and hours and what it has to do. But then that thing kind of gets broken down. So that's at a higher level. Right. And then it goes down there, and you're right. At this point, the car is looking 20 to 30 seconds ahead, trying to figure out what it's supposed to do, then down to the microsecond of what it's actually doing with steering the car. And this is something that's been discussed about bot agents in general. And I think Jan LeCun was going through a lot about that description, I think, on with Lex Friedman, talking about like this hierarchical problem of breaking it down. This idea that you want to plan a trip from New York to Paris, and what are all the steps that are involved from that? And you think, oh, that's just easy. Just, book a flight from here to, it's like, oh yeah, but we want to break it down even further. Is that I've got to get to the airport. How do I get to the airport? Oh, I got to take a taxi. Okay. How do I hail a taxi? Okay. You get it. Okay. I got to get down to the taxi, which means I got to get up from my chair. I got to go over to the elevator. I got to push it, all those little micro things. And then when you finally get to the airplane, you got to get on there. So there's just kind of these different levels of hierarchical planning that you have to go through. And Optimus is going to be thinking the same way. It's like, you're giving it a big task, and it's going to be doing all those things, but then it just kind of ignores that and goes to like short-term memory. It's like, what do I do to accomplish this? And goes down through the checklist again and again and again. So that's, I don't think it's going to be that hard, but as far as it being able to handle the motion, I mean, we see it. the bots are moving around already. They're able to do that. They're able to take tasks. You're able to do this reasoning on there. And I'm looking forward to seeing what's going on, because I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot more, because there was a little bit of news this week.
Okay.
And that again goes to the job descriptions for Tesla bot.
Yes.
And yesterday there was a description for, and it seems like really banal kind of thing, technical writer.
Yeah.
Someone to write the documentation for the Optimus user manual.
Right.
And it's like, wow. Okay. And I was like, well, it's, so it's like, well, that, you will bring some of the tech writers in at some point to get your product out. And, sometimes it may not be a bad idea to have them in there a little bit earlier to kind of figure out how to organize it and get everything together. But a lot of them are like, well, usually that's a late stage kind of thing, that now you start taking what has been their internal documentation, because whenever you're doing any engineering, there is always internal documents. Yeah. And then you're figuring out, well, how do we take that stuff and turn it into something that we want the outside world to do? And you want to bring them in, and it doesn't mean that it's imminent, that they're releasing it tomorrow. But remember, Elon did say something about, they would like to start shipping
next year,
early next year. And it's like, oh, okay. So if you're going to ship it, you need to have documentation with this thing. Now I'm not sure how thick the documentation, because, even when I look at my Tesla and a lot of these other products, like my Starlink dish, there ain't a whole lot of documentation. The documentation is like, scan this QR code, right, and get it off the internet somewhere. So it's hard to say what's going to come there, but clearly there's going to need to be something.
Well, that came just a couple of days after they had put out a hire for somebody to go out and work in
yeah,
factory locations
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
needed to
yeah.
travel a lot in order to
Mhm.
set up the bot to work in a workspace.
Yeah. Now, if these customers are internal,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that you really care about getting a tech writer,
Mhm.
because you don't care about glossy documentation at
Right.
that point. It's when you're starting to go to the outside world and you're thinking a lot of these things like, well, yeah, they're going to need it about this, that, and everything else. You have to make sure it's properly documented. It's down there. Yeah, you need the internal documentation because not everyone knows what's going on. Nobody. There's like no one person with like the complete overview. It's like at some point it's got to be written down. You got to look it up to understand what's going on. So you just kind of need that just to make sure you have a central location for all the information of how it's going on the project, and then you figure out how to pull it out. And then, you know, in some ways, I'm almost surprised. Yeah, they really, these days, you still need the tech writers because a lot of documentation is self-documentation now. Like in the software world, you're supposed to document your code in a particular way. And if you do your headers and stuff like that, there are these systems that just go through and pull everything out, and from it are able to create the reference manuals and everything else. It's almost automatic. And the question is like, do you actually need a tech writer at that point, or you just need someone who is going to collate all this stuff? Because if you get the right AI tools, I'm sure you could come up with some pretty good documentation pretty quick. And I'm sure whoever it is like thinking of leaning on that, because why not?
Well, you and I talked about the fact that the bot would be its own documentation source. You would just
In
say,
many ways. Yeah. Yeah.
you're not doing what I want. What do I need to do to do it right?
Exactly. I mean, C-3PO was exactly that way. He kept on yelling at Chewbacca. It's like, you dumb Wookiee, what are you doing now? It's like, it's over there. You put my arms in back, so in many ways, and we shouldn't be surprised, because isn't that how the Teslas are kind of when they're coming off the line?
Yeah, yeah,
They almost say, oh, okay, this is what I need now, or check
yeah.
out this part, because they're almost self-aware of what their state of assembly is. And so you can imagine the same thing with the bots, that, once you're having some limited boot stage, it can tell you the rest of what needs to be going on. There's no doubt about it. So yeah,
In,
I'd be surprised if there's any paper documentation. It's,
in that
PDFs at best.
in that job description, it also said that they would be working with the customer service people. So that
Yeah.
would imply that there's going to be
Be a
customer service
customer
people,
service
and there
department,
already
which is,
are customer service people that have been hired.
well, are you sure the customer service people or customer service bots? That's what I
There
almost,
you go.
that's what I almost wonder, is at some point it's just, you won't know
Well, okay.
how many.
So I've been really concentrating the last couple of weeks with you on speed, and we've seen faster robots doing faster things. But I started remembering sometimes you have to go outside the field, and not humanoid bots, but other bots. We've seen some ping pong playing bots that had very fast reflexes, faster
Yeah.
reflexes even than you would need to drive a car.
Well, okay. Okay. Let me see. There was like one out there showing like a humanoid bot playing ping pong, and that was complete CGI.
Well, I'm talking, this was not a humanoid. This was just a
Probably
bot.
I think you might be talking about like the KUKA bot. So there is a KUKA
Yes,
bot that
yes.
played against, I think, like one of the world
Yeah,
champions,
yeah,
Timo something or other, and that was like in 2014 or something like that. So
yeah,
that was just a standard industrial bot, and
yeah.
and also at the end he was a little bit cocky, the bot, just like, look at me, and so. I mean, that's the thing, is you get the vision systems and they can move pretty quick. So industrial bots, they're going really fast. But remember, they're plugged in the wall.
Yeah.
They've got 480. If it was over in Germany, they had like 480 in that thing, so they had plenty of voltage.
Yeah.
So and those things easily are going 3 to 5 meters a second out there, and especially, I mean, if it's holding onto a ping pong paddle, that's like absolutely no way. That bot just, and then you just tie it into these vision systems. And a lot of that was being done way before you had good neural nets in your vision systems. So that was almost using these heuristic values.
Yeah.
So they're like, just be able to react to it pretty quick. So yeah, they can move around. You'll see a bit more, but there's one thing you're almost bearing the lead here, is that wasn't there a post from Elon just before we came on?
There was, and it was he was responding to a Scorus ARC. So in other words, Sam Chorus from ARC Invest, saying that a human robot is less than 1/10 the weight of a car. Can the manufacturing ramp be 10 times that of a vehicle? Does that even matter? It seems like the constraint is going to be software capability, not manufacturing capability. Elon Musk responded, not really answering the question.
Exactly. Yeah, not really, but answering the question I've been wanting him to answer. Yeah, go ahead.
Complexity per unit mass is much higher with humanoid robots, but still, I think it ends up costing less than half a car.
Yes. So less than half a car.
Right.
So he kind of dodged the whole idea that, whether the scaling would, and in many ways, the ramp up should be quicker.
Way
Whether you can say it's a
right.
10x, but
Right.
the footprint's going to be smaller, the scaling is going to be a lot faster. It's almost like he dodged the question, but answered it with, want to know, it's like, how much do you think it's going to cost? And he said this before, and it is kind of confirming again. So that's half the cost. Now, what is half the cost? Is it, you talk about half the cost of the lowest end Tesla vehicle, which will eventually be the 25K. So that gets you at 12.5. And then I think he even followed up after that saying something, hope, and it should go down from there.
Good. Yes.
So eventually it'll go lower. Now, again, this is not, oh, this is what it's going to cost next year. It's more or less him saying, they believe they can get there, or it should.
Right.
And all indications are that. Now, most of the bot manufacturers, when you do talk to them, are a little bit high and above that, because I think they're being very careful. It might be they don't really want anyone to know how much it costs to build it.
Right.
Because if they knew, they wouldn't be able to charge $100,000 for it.
They might not even be very good at doing a cost of goods analysis on it.
But most of them feel that they could do it, around 50, between 40 and 50. They're all comfortable with that. And
at cost,
that would be their cost. That would be that's what we just, so they're pretty sure they can get to that.
Yeah.
And I think what they're being very cautious, they're like, yes, we could see a way to be there, but you'd have to say that I'm pretty sure it will go way, way, way down from there as well, because you're just going to be riding that S curve at some point. And again, so Elon has kind of confirmed that it's much lower than that, but again, he's talking about eventually you'll get there. And it really comes down to, I think one of the key things in there, he talked about that it's more complex per unit volume. And what he's really saying is those actuators, there's really a lot that goes into building those things. And so there's a certain amount of complexity. Yes. And, if you just imagine, it's like, okay, a smartphone, it's $1,000 for that thing, right?
Yeah.
For that small thing. Now stack together 30 cell phones, and it's not even enough to fit in the front seat. Right. Okay. And it's already worth more than the car. Right. So, you can see that the complexity can get there. So just imagine if every single actuator was the complexity of a cell phone. Well, quickly you're getting to $40,000.
Right.
But when you strip away the actuators, everything else is very simple, very, it's not going to be that complicated to be able to put together. So it's good to hear that. And that gives us an idea that, they're pretty sure that they can make them for less than 1,000. And I think at that number, we might be looking at
less than 10,000.
Yeah. If we're looking at 12.5, then based on the number of actuators, I think you're looking at maybe just a couple $100 per actuator to make for the cost. It's not down at what I'm thinking eventually might be $100 per actuator, because when you do that, that's when you get down to like $7-8 grand for building it.
So I've been meaning to ask you about that. So I don't know anything about actuators. The last time I had anything to do with an actuator was when I had an erector set and I was too poor to afford the basic little motors that you could
I thought you were an actuator. How about the guy that comes out and the insurance guy that tries to figure out how much,
No,
that's the actuary. No.
I was pre-Legos. I was erector. Yeah. Anyway, but so you brought this up a couple of weeks ago. I've been meaning to ask. These actuators have to work. Well, I mean, you can replace them, I suppose, but basically you're talking about an actuator that's going to be doing activity 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days. I mean, these things are not only going to have to be able to do their job, whatever that is immediately in terms of weight that it's lifting or whatever it's pushing or whatever it needs in terms of being able to spring, all those kinds of things, but it has to do it over and over and over again for a very long amount of time and do it at low watts. So could all of those things combined make these actuators more expensive, or is once you've got the invention, does it really still just come down to first principles? It's this much copper and this much metal.
Yeah. So from the material standpoint, it's not going to be that costly unless they have to use some really bizarre kind of rare earth metal in there. And it's probably not. Maybe the most expensive thing will probably be copper or something like that. Once they have the design down and really, there may be some tight tolerances and a few things, but it's very different. I don't see like the RPMs of these things being like extreme, that it's some things under extreme load or having to do extreme performance or anything like that. You just want to make sure they're reliable, that they are able to react the way that you want. And because they're low power, I mean, it's like usually what burns things out is the fact that you're putting way more current through it than they can handle for a long period of time. So they're not going to be demanding that much current because they're trying to be as efficient as possible. But you got to remember, an actuator is really a fancy motor. So it has a motor, it has a gearbox, and it has some sort of encoders for position, for measuring its position, and probably some controller that's in there. So it takes the command that this is where I want you to go to, and it figures out how to go to with whatever the requirements are. So it's a compact little piece of technology that, but will be easy to replace. It's going to be one of those things that you swap in, swap out. Maybe it's a simple thing. Is like, oh, we've got a problem with the armature or something like that. You just like pull it out, put another one in, or it might just be just pull another actuator off the shelf and put it in there. And if someone wants to repair that later on, they can go ahead and do it. So that should be pretty easy. And the other thing is we've got electric motors that in our lives that are around there that have long duty cycles that last for years and years and years, and we never notice it. So, it could be like, the fans in your heating systems, or, compressors, or your refrigerator. Now, they're not necessarily running 24/7. They do have these duty cycles, but they keep coming on and off, on and off and off. In some ways, that's almost worse. And when they come on, they're working hard. They're working really hard, as opposed to kind of taking it easy. And for the most part, the actuators aren't going to be under extreme loading all the time.
Yeah.
So there may be every now and then there's something they have to do a little bit, but they're only lifting 50 pounds, which is not that much for a motor. And they have more than enough in reserve to be able to do it. So, unless Optimus is just doing backflips all day long, it should be fine just being able to walk around.
Okay. Well, you've answered all of my questions. Oh, no, I did have one more. I almost forgot. We had this new video that I understand you haven't even seen yet, from a company that has named their bot Q, just Q. It's a Chinese company. And this bot, among other things that it could do, most of the things it could do we kind of saw before, but this particular bot was able to shoot a bow and arrow, and it was actually showed it getting a bullseye. So was there anything clever or cute or interesting in that? One person at least commented, they said that was that was kind of an impressive thing for a bot to be able to do.
Yeah, I shot a bullseye once too, but I didn't get it on film. A lot of takes. It's like, yeah, I suppose I haven't seen it to what's going on there. In many ways, without seeing what the arm is like, but I assume it probably has a pretty stiff arm, which what you've done enough practice with it, you'd expect to be able to figure it out. It's a lot of people that have made these bots for being able to play pool and stuff like that, and it's a simple physics 101 kind of problem. So, my X handle is going ballistic. So, like the ballistic motion equation, and that's basically what it is that. If you know the distance to target and you know where you want to go and you kind of know where it is and you've got an idea of how much popping, you can figure that thing out. And, and the big question is whether they're actually doing it heuristically and calculating what you have to do to hit it.
Yeah.
Or whether it was just through trial and error and doing enough examples that the neural net figures out. It's like, oh, I think it's like this and I ought to hit it. Yeah. And then you never know. It's like they keep on doing a bunch of shots and then they get that one on tape. It's like, look, see, got a bullseye.
They definitely didn't tell us. They definitely didn't tell us.
Yeah, they didn't show all the misses. Yeah.
All right. So anything else that you saw this week or that's been
or didn't see? I mean, I didn't see it enough to be able to fully critique it. But yeah, it's only late Tuesday night here, and we'll see what the rest of the week brings. It's probably going to be rather interesting as we exit the March of Nines here and see what other interesting new developments are going to happen in the AI world. I mean, there's still a big discussion. We start out talking about AGI, right?
Yes.
And I kind of skirted the whole idea of like, what's the definition of that? And again, the definition I can't remember which Supreme Court justice it was. The one that I'm going to talk about is that, it's like, I don't know, I don't have a good definition for pornography, but I know it when I see it.
Right. Exactly.
And it's the same thing with AGI, is that no one has a good definition, but we're really going to know it when we see it. And a lot of people are arguing that we might be there already with Claude and Chat GPT and some of these others. And the question is that these things are so good at figuring out what our prompts are and wanting to please us that it's really hard to try to ask it a question like, are you conscious? And it might just come back and say, so yes or no. And it's like, how do we know? Is it lying to us or not lying to us? Is it just trying
Yeah.
to please us? It's very hard. So I'm more or less in the camp that I'm not going to be fooled by it. I'm just saying, man, that's an impressive party trick that thing's doing. And in many ways, I view these LLMs as being the most impressive con men ever. Because the whole idea of a confidence man is like the ability to really make you believe in something that's not there. And they're able to do it with limited input. They know enough and they can fill in the picture. And then you keep on filling the picture for them because they know how to ask the right questions.
Right.
And remember, the whole reward system of these things is in a sense to please you, the human.
Yeah.
And so long as that goes on, it's going to do whatever it needs. And that's what your pets do. I mean, the pets realize that if they please the humans, they get fed and they get all these other things taken care of. So in order to meet their need, they will do whatever it is. And if it means do this cute, adorable things with their eyes and their faces that make you think that they're actually, really human,
yeah, right.
They're not. They're doing it because they know you give them kibbles afterwards.
So Elon was interviewed today about the very subject of AGI and what it means and the singularity and all that. And he did make two comments that I thought were useful. He said, on the one hand, he says, he says that it should be trained to tell the truth. So kind of to what you were just saying, don't say what you think I want to hear. Don't say whatever you make up. It's got to be trained to tell the truth. And if it does that, we should be well along the way to something pretty good. And the second half of his thought was, or maybe it was you earlier that said this, I'm getting confused now who said it. If it gets to the place where it is curious about things, that would be pretty good evidence that we've gone into AGI.
It's getting into kind of a self-learning mode, a certain curiosity and that's where exploration comes in. It's really hard for an LLM to do it. Unless the LLM is like connected to the internet and it starts just searching stuff for itself and, oh, I like this YouTube video. I hear this suggestion. Hey, I'm curious. Let me go ahead and do that. But when you have it embodied, then you can start to have more curiosity. You can attempt to do things to see what works and doesn't work, and maybe go out and start exploring the world beyond just what's in the lab and seeing what does happen. So that would be one part of the puzzle, along with a bunch of other things that have to be done. No doubt about it.
Well, Scott, as always, it's fascinating to have you on board. You did win the contest last week in terms of the most watched video on my channel. I don't know about anybody else's channel, but yeah, you knocked it out of the park last week.
Oh, great to know. Great to know. Wow. Thank you.
We'll see if you could do it again.
Yeah. So you're welcome back on my podcast anytime you want.
That's good. Thanks as always for joining us for the Wednesday edition of whatever I call this middle of the day show. I have a name for the morning show and a name for the night show, but I've never named middle show. I don't know what. Anyway, Scott, thanks again. It's been great.
Yep. You're welcome, Randy. And notice we both are floral again today.
We have it. We finally are doing.
We finally did. We finally coordinated.
Right. And all of you out there, it has been great talking to you. And we're probably just robots, but you will never know that.